There are some paintings that somehow grab your attention. You've never seen them before, you don't recognize them, yet they pull your gaze towards themselves. I feel like Beauty Revealed is one of these paintings for obvious reasons. But are these reasons that obvious? Do these paintings grab your attention the same way Beauty Revealed does? They don't, do they? Let's explore why. As you learn more and more about this work, the more it becomes intriguing. First, it was made in 1828, so we're far from being in an age of sexual liberation, although erotic paintings still existed back then. However, there's something different about Beauty Revealed. I feel like there's an implied seduction. It's not outwardly erotic like the works of Paul Avril, for example. Second, it's tiny, measuring 6.7 centimeters by 8 centimeters. Miniatures were pretty common at the time, depicting more often than not portraits of loved ones. Their level of detail is astounding, and Beauty Revealed is no exception, displaying incredible depth through the use of shadows. Thirdly, Beauty Revealed wasn't made, as we might assume, by a man. Traditionally, most female nudes were painted by men, all throughout art history, through the male gaze. I briefly talked about the male gaze without mentioning it in a video I made a while ago on Sylvia Slay. One day I'd like to dedicate a whole video to it. In a nutshell, the male gaze is the idea that the depiction of women in art is very often the product of a heterosexual male perspective. Through that perspective, through that way of seeing, through that gaze, women have often been disempowered, sexualized, and objectified. As John Berger says in Ways of Seeing, men act and women appear. Men look at women. Women watch themselves being looked at. The male gaze is the embodiment of this phenomena in art. However, Beauty Revealed, as I said, wasn't made by a man. It was made by a woman, and not any woman at that. The subject sitting for this portrait is the artist herself. Beauty Revealed is a self-portrait made by Sarah Goodridge. It was given as a present to her lover, the politician Daniel Webster. It's an anonymous nude, and only Webster at the time could have known the hidden identity because of the beauty mark on the subject's right. So this painting captivates our attention through its subject matter, its bold frontal composition, and its seductiveness. We can now appreciate it better considering it's a miniature nude self-portrait of a woman at a time when this kind of art could have been scandalous. However, not much more is known about this painting, and perhaps it's all we need to enjoy it. Now, I want to give you two different ways of analyzing this artwork. First, we can look at this painting as an icon of women empowerment and emancipation. She is not only appropriating her own body through her art, but offering it as something she has control over. Nobody, no traditions, no outside force will stop her from offering her body if she wants to. In the portrayal of her breasts, she's also displaying independence through the fact that she is the one painting them. Nobody is showing her body for her. She's doing it by herself, of her own volition. This interpretation presents Sarah Goodridge as an independent, free, and empowered woman, and in a way, that's pretty undeniable. She was independent enough to be a self-employed artist, and she was emancipated enough to send a sexually explicit painting of herself. She, in many ways, didn't conform to the ideal of a childbearing, homemaking woman of the 19th century. She liberated herself from these expectations. However, I also want to analyze this painting not only through the lens of women's emancipation, but also through the concept of the internalized male gaze. A woman, even as emancipated as Goodridge was, will still be heavily impacted by a man-dominated world. That being said, the way she acts, dresses, appears, what she does, and how she does it will often be commented on, scrutinized, and criticized. Perhaps looking at her portrait through the concept of the internalized male gaze could be a product of the scrutiny that women very often fall prey to. However, for what it's worth, my intention of talking about the internalized male gaze is to raise awareness about it, not to criticize Goodridge. So, what is the internalized male gaze? I briefly mentioned the male gaze earlier, how it places women and the image of women as objects. I want to complete the quote I gave earlier. Men act and women appear. Men look at women. Women watch themselves being looked at. This determines not only most relations between men and women, but also the relation of women to themselves. The surveyor of woman in herself is male, the surveyed female. Thus, she turns herself into an object, and most particularly, an object of vision, a sight. And what is this work of art if not that? A woman turning herself into an object of vision, a sight. The internalized male gaze is the pressure that women can sometimes put on themselves to please a male viewer. Shaving and wearing makeup is often used as an example of a habit enforced by the male gaze. Why does a woman shave or why does she wear makeup? That's entirely up to her, but she might have internalized the male gaze which, without her being aware of it, influences her decisions and her identity. This does not mean that everything a woman does is a product of a social pressure to please men. Maybe you do wear makeup for yourself and not for the male gaze. Maybe you do shave your legs for yourself and not for the male gaze. Maybe you did paint your breasts because you wanted to and not for the male gaze. However, it's extremely important to understand the subconscious pressure of the internalized male gaze and how it can influence our very way of interacting with the world and others. Sarah Goodridge was an empowered woman, especially to the standards of 19th century America, and as demonstrated by this painting, she used this freedom and independence to sexualize herself into an object for a man she liked, something most women at that time wouldn't have had the freedom to do. This painting is the product of an emancipated woman, a woman who was able to embrace and express her sexuality in a way very few women could at that time, at least publicly. However, and this could be equally true, this painting, which might not even be the product of the internalized male gaze, and it's not up to me to judge, this painting is still a great representation, an icon of what the internalized male gaze might look like. When a woman turns herself into an object, and most particularly an object of vision, a sight. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, thank you for liking and subscribing if you have already, and I'd like to thank, as always again, my patrons for supporting this channel. If you also want to support the channel, check out patreon.com/thecanvas.